Hello, this is Jamaica Piper, and today I am going to be discussing AI research and considerations specifically for AI integration. Um, I want to start off with a little bit of a disclaimer. Most of my context is related to dealing with AI and qualitative data, and really within the social sciences. So that will be sort of the framework that I'm using to sort of organize some of the issues that I think we should be thinking about as we are considering integrating AI into our research workflow. That said, let's get started. Now, there are some do's and don'ts for AI integration that we should know right off the bat. First and foremost is before you just jump into using AI, you have to think about anything policy wise. It could be like your institutional policy, departmental policy, IRB, and or any, if you're dealing with grant related data, any restrictions that might be associated with the grant funding agency. So knowing those up front can help save you some time, and also making sure that you're in compliance with the ethical best practices that might be attached to your data set. Likewise, you want to make sure that you are conscious about what is the standard of security that is needed for the type of data that you're dealing with. So, for example, there's tasks and things that you might be able to do with something that is not as secure if your data, as long as your data is identified, that you might not be able to do if you're dealing with more sensitive type of data, such as something connected to health or medical practices, or even certain military or governmental agency type data. Or not lastly, I know for certain disciplines, so this is more of a discipline specific thing, um, they there's an intent to make AI as sort of the sole data purveyor, meaning that there is no human in the loop. We don't want to be in the loop, at least when it comes to sort of the analysis and put together some of the actual on the grounds analysis. However, again, for this context that I'm going to be talking about it, I'm going to push that you have a human in the loop. And actually, even if you aren't dealing with qualitative data and you're dealing with quantitative data, I would encourage you highly to still think about where the human in the loop is going to be, because there has to be some aspect of verification and validation when it comes to how that data has been processed by the AI. And it goes also with when you think about the methodological piece of this as well. You want to make sure that you are implementing AI because it is a tool from a methodologically sound perspective. Now, I did say earlier, just a few seconds ago, about the human in the loop. So this is sort of a principle that's out there. You can kind of go look up a little bit more about it. But some of the known issues that we see with AI, specifically about how it processes data, can make it can be a bit of concern. And so we know that there's a huge potential for it to misattribute, to misapply informational context, or not apply informational context at all in terms of how it's generating its outcomes. And so we just want to make sure that we are validating and that the information that it's spitting out is actually substantiated by the evidence that we've collected, and also that the interpretations are accurate for these type of processes and data that we were gathering. Okay, so that said, this brings me to my first point here. There should not be hopefully you don't feel any kind of pressure to use AI, because I know it's sort of a sexy new buzzword and it's everywhere. The whole reason you might want to use AI is if it fits potentially with your methodological design. Um, so you want to make sure that there's an alignment between whatever AI tool that you're selecting and where you're going to implement it, and being able to also account for that in whatever sort of epistemological, ontological, philosophical, knowledge production, knowledge orientation systems that are governing your study. And so I'm not going to read this to you, but this was also generated with AI. All my graphics, with the exception of my tables, have been generated with AI. And so I wanted you to, I'm just going to leave this here. This is a really cool graphic that I think captures methodological fit as a concept. And I'm not going to read it to you because you can pause the video and go over it yourself. But I just want to, again, point out that there needs to be some alignment between our methodology and the tool that we select. And now, getting more into the nitty gritty, a lot of those problems that were explained earlier, not all of them, but some of them can actually be triaged from the prompt. So literally, we tend to approach AI like we do Google, and honestly, this is not the best approach for Google either, where we just throw in any question and we get the response and we take it on faith that the AI has run its algorithm appropriately and is pulling things in alignment with our prompting question. Now, if you're doing something real basic, that might be a fine approach, but when it comes to research, you're doing more complex tasks and you're asking for more higher order outcomes. And so when you start thinking about that, that requires more precision, more intentionality with both what you're prompting and also like any sub evidence that you might have also be providing. And therefore, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some things that you can do real easily to sharpen the AI's interpretive capabilities. So one, make sure that you're using some structured prompting. Structured prompting can look like the role task, like here's a role, here's your task, here's the informational context, and here's the framework that I'm using, and here's what I'm looking for. It could also look like a markdown. So markdown is more of a formal, a little more formalized, but I think the more complex your task is, the better that markdown is with helping you establish, like here, if there's a lot of potential conditions, one to establish conditions for behavior in terms of like what to prioritize, what to do if something is absent from like an Excel file or a column in your file. That kind of structuring response can be very useful. Having an analytical framework. You can't, if you're asking, open-endedly asking this machine to, hey, tell me this XYZ thing about this topic, but you're asking to do that analysis, but you haven't given it like your codebook data or the analytic framework that you specifically are using, then that leads a lot to a misalignment between the AI's output or interpretation and then what it is that you actually need in terms of your study. You can ask for negative case examples, and this is really great. This is where you take your specific literature, like themes in your literature even, and you can say, hey, can you give me some counter examples or counter essays or counter interpretations that can help strengthen ultimately your arguments, your findings, etc. And the last one, that adversarial prompting, this, at least to me, I think is more like if you're actually designing, like if you've actually built a model or like an AI agent or something where you can do some of the stress testing because you will have built in particular safety protocols. So this will allow you to sort of stress test that, and so you can have a degree of surety and how that AI is going to respond to any potential attacks to get your machine to go against its protocols. And lastly, the thing you should also be doing is keeping an audit trail. So it doesn't have to look like this, right? It can, but it should be some sort of formal documentation that, if you're doing a joint study, a joint group project using AI, it's clear like the date, time, tool, what you actually asked it to input to get the tool to do XYZ, as well as what were some of the findings, but also how you cross-validated it. So the key thing here is validation, validation, and checking. So that kind of are like some of the main tips I've seen for AI integration. And I don't want this to be too long, but that should be enough, hopefully, to get you guys thinking. As always, if you have any questions, there's my name and my email. So please go ahead and reach out. Thank you for your time.